Hey guys, I am outside my Regal Cinema. There we go. Yeah, I'm about to go inside and purchase, or not really purchase, but to get my free movie ticket redeemed for today's review. I hope you guys appreciate just how much length I go to provide good content, because I seriously did not want to review this movie. I could have been at home watching the opening for the Olympics today, but because I want to gain more subscribers and because I'm a sadomasochist, I'm willing to put up with pain and suffering just to get views. So, just so I'm not making this up, this is the actual ticket that I bought. So, yeah. Oh boy, here we go.
2 hours later.
So, here we are. The ending of a trilogy that I don't think anyone asked for. Let's start off by heading back to the mid 2000s when Twilight was released. Every mother on the planet, every 30-year-old would look up to these films and say, they're alright. But in comes E.L. James, an author who could not be bothered to come up with anything original and decided to steal the blueprint map of the entirety of Twilight. Even Twilight and 50 Shades fans have noticed that the author, E.L. James, is just a blatant plagiarizer. So instead of having, vampires and werewolves, she decides to have it be more of a power fantasy novel series where it's more about BDSM and violating relationships and millionaires and money and cars. Pretty much, E.L. James's books have become kind of this power fantasy marketable porn. And so what else to expect from Universal Studios than to create a marketable porn trilogy? And that's pretty much what we've gotten for the past couple of years. And now we come to... Okay, I am not even going to attempt to read that tagline. Get that poster off of my screen. Out. Shoo. Anyways, we finally come to the ending of this trilogy. After so many years of torment with this trilogy, what do we end up with? A movie that is, well, pretty much the same as everyone else. It's boring, monotonous, not very hot, not very steamy at all. In fact, most of the shots are just exploitive, and that's not really hot at all. See, there is an art to making a sex scene. There's an art to making sex scenes in general. And this movie just flat out says, hey, look, you know what the source material is, and now we're going to give it to you. Porn. Now, as I showed you earlier in this video, I did go in alone. But before the movie began, there was a couple of friends that came in, and we decided to sit together, and we watched it. And at the end, I had a very interesting discussion with one of my friends where it came to what this film trilogy ending is, essentially. This movie, in terms of the other films, are not as exploitive as the other two. In fact, half of this movie is that exploitation type stuff. It is that BDSM stuff that we kind of know, but they're toned down just a bit. The other half is just drama that, personally, I couldn't give any less of a shit about. In fact, the movie just kind of is very half-assed about, talking about these issues. There's even points in the movie where I questioned a lot of what their marriage is, because this movie starts off with a marriage, and then a couple scenes later, Dakota Johnston is asking whatever the hell Mr. Grey is, she asks Mr. Grey, hey, you wanted kids, right? It's like, di- I think with any marriage, you should kind of, go through what your individual thoughts are in your marriage. Do you want to have kids? And if both sides want to have kids, yeah, sure, get married. I mean, that's your choice, right? Marriage is a choice. But it just seems to me that a lot of this relationship is very half-assed, and they're kind of both assholes to each other. They really are. And I can't really get into spoilers because, granted, I wish I could spoil it, but pretty much by the end of it, I forgot most of it. Pretty much this is another one of those forgettable movies out there that you just, again, you don't care about at all at the end. And that's just a testament of how this trilogy is. And again, it's perfectly perplexing that this whole franchise has continued to get made. I mean, yes, it makes money. It definitely does. And I don't blame people for liking it. Look, if you like this franchise, that's fine, right? I think people should like porn, right? Porn is just something that's, it's just there, right? And if you like it, fine. And I'm not saying that porn shouldn't be outlawed, but if you're going to a movie, chances are you want to see a movie with relatable characters, with an actual story, with, actual drama and tension and storytelling, and all of those things that I just mentioned are not in this film at all. And even if this movie has some semblance of a story structure, that still doesn't excuse this movie from still being bad. It's a bad movie and a bad trilogy that should never have been made in the first place, but because of how popular Twilight became, they decided to make this into a feature film trilogy. And I know that's going to piss off some people, and I want to say, again, if you like this movie, that's fine. I personally don't care about the franchise. I've hated it from day one. It pretty much is a toxic relationship, right? Both players in this relationship treat each other like shit. And look, and granted, they're not full trashy, right? They're not trashy people, but I just don't like them. I didn't like the characters then when I first saw these movies, and I don't like them now. They're not characters I would personally relate to. They're not characters that I would randomly strike up a conversation with. Again, I don't care. And is there anything good about this movie, right? Because I seem to be harping on them for the past 7 minutes almost now. Okay, so there is a couple things that are decent, right? Nothing too extravagant, nothing too extravagant. But if it's a couple things that I happen to like in this film, the lighting's okay. The audio for the most part works, except for one scene. There's some good cinematography, some decent cinematography, at least that's good. But the acting, the writing, the constant need to use pop music in a movie that should be about love and relationships kind of makes no sense to me. It just seems that most of the film's soundtrack is just kind of like, oh, well, we need more pop songs. I swear, at some point in the movie, because they were playing so many pop songs in relation to sex scenes, I started thinking of The Room. I really did. And I don't think anyone would blame me. I really don't think anyone would blame me for thinking that the sex scenes in the 50 Shades franchise with all the pop music associated with them would be in any way related to The Room. And I'll just leave it there. This franchise has had enough airtime as it is. This movie is still dog shit, in my opinion. It isn't even a good movie. I wouldn't even suggest watching it. And granted, look, I sacrificed 2 hours of my time just to tell you that this movie is shit, right? And it's just not worth it. It's not worth it. Even on a so bad it's good level, it's not worth it. Because again, writing, the acting, the music, which is oddly scored by Danny Elfman for no reason, just pretty much everything in this movie sucks except for the lighting and kind of some of the cinematography. But other than that, on those two things, they barely pale in comparison to any of the story, to any of the characters. And look, again, I want to emphasize, this is my opinion only, right? If you don't think my opinion is valid, that's completely fair, right? If you like this movie, that's fine. And look, if you love this, that's fine. Just don't try to convince me otherwise, because I really didn't like it. I could probably find better porn online than this. But anyways, I've prolonged this a bit too long. What does this movie get? Well, not surprisingly, this movie gets an F-. Even with some of the more better aspects that have elevated over the past 3 films, it still pales in comparison to all the bullshit that's happened between all 3 movies, with the terrible acting, the terrible scripts, the fact that that Universal continued to go through with this trilogy. And actually, that could also be commendable, the fact that Universal would consider continuing with this movie trilogy. But I've said my piece. 50 Shades franchise is now dead. It's gone. It's in the ground. Let's move on to something else. This has been Nicholas Jennings for Spearman Studios, and I hope you have a fun night watching better movies than this.